1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move, whatever click you choose.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down! Welcome to my animated prison stories. For those of y'all new to my page, in 1994 I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. During those times I accumulated some good stories, so let's get into one right now. So today I'm going to do a video about California Men's Colony, or CMC East. From time to time when I do a video and I mention that prison, I'll get a comment in the comment section, and to keep it 100, it's always from a Hispanic saying something along the lines of, isn't that prison no good? Or, hey, you know, that dude is no good, he was at CMC. So let me break that down for you guys. To my understanding, at some point, Southern Hispanics, the Northern Hispanics, to keep it fair also, and the whites made California Men's Colony off limits for their people. Meaning that if you happen to get put up for transfer by California Department of Corrections and you were going to CMC East, once you got there, you had to leave by way of violence. Meaning that once you were released to the yard, you had to go out there and get into a fight. You would be sent to the hole, eventually provided paperwork saying that you were refusing to be housed at CMC, and once you got to wherever you were going, you could provide that paperwork to who you function with, showing them that you refused to program at CMC. You would be deemed good by whoever you function with. Like I said, the blacks, the Pisces, and the others, they never implemented that policy. California Men's Colony was never deemed a special needs prison by the administration. That was something, like I said, those organizations put in policy for their people. So do me a favor if you get a chance. Donovan, Chuckawalla, Salinas Valley, Ironwood, all those prisons at some point in time had designated yards that were known as special needs yards. So if you Google that, you'll see that. Then I want you to Google California Men's Colony and see if that prison was ever made a special needs prison. So like I say, while we give big respect to those organizations that made that policy for their people, those policies for those organizations don't dictate what the blacks do. Let me tell you guys how I got to CMC. I was at a level 2. I was at a SADF level 2. I was charged with a stabbing. I ended up going to the hole. I eventually beat those stabbing charges. So now here I am thinking I'm going to get released back to the 2 yard, but they end up sending me to a level 4 180 yard, which is a shoe kickout yard. So while I went to the hole, I was never really in the shoe because I was never found guilty. So I did have level 3 points. I no longer had level 2 points. I had level 3 points. So once I got to the level 4, all the blacks, Crips, Bloods, up north, wherever, we were slammed down. Reason being, they had an incident on the yard maybe a month or 2 prior with involving the Southern Hispanics. Once that situation was clear and the COs were walking back to the buildings, all the convicts were still on the ground. A black Crip from San Diego had a knife on him, and for whatever reason, he jumped up and just started stabbing one of the guards. And for that reason, the blacks, Crips, Bloods, whatever, they all were put on lockdown. So when I got to that yard, we were on lockdown. We weren't getting any store, we weren't getting any yard, anything. So to me, I had a better program being in the hole. In the hole, I was still being able to go to the yard. I still was being able to go to the store, stuff like that. And like I said, I didn't have level 4 points. So I immediately filed what is known as an inmate grievance, or 602, asking could I be moved. Also, they had a level 3 on that yard, but it was the gym. They had converted the gym into a level 3. So, and the level 3s were being able to go to the store. So I asked, due to the fact that I had level 3 points, could I be placed in that gym and or transferred to a level 3? They responded and told me no. I was already up for transfer to Centinela and Pleasant Valley. They denied my 602, so I submitted it to the next level and went about my business there on that level 4. Maybe in about, I would like to say, a month, they called me to transpack. Normally when you transpack, you take all your property over there to R&R, and they check your property in and stuff, and then you leave maybe 3 or 4 days later. They told me that I was leaving that day, and maybe in about an hour or two, they transferred me in a van along with 3 or 4 other people to CMC East, and that's how I wound up at CMC East. Until that time, I had never even heard of CMC East. California has about maybe 32, 33 prisons. So when you get to CMC East, they eventually put you in what's known as a reception cell. That reception cell happens to face the yard, and when you're coming across the yard in your jumpsuit, of course people can see that you're new arrivals, and eventually somebody will come up to you and ask you, or they'll come to that cell and holler, where you guys from, and eventually send some of your homies or something like that over there. And so you have to stay in that reception cell for 24 hours till you get cleared to come to yard. So once I came to yard, I was introduced to people from my area, and I'm out there kicking it, talking, stuff like that. Maybe in about a week or so, one of my homies there told me, hey man, you know that the Southerners are not allowed at this prison. They're not supposed to be here. And then they explained the policy of coming down there, hitting the yard, having 48 hours to leave, or they would be deemed no good by their people. Initially, I didn't believe it. Reason being is because the yard was full of Southerners. The Southern population at that prison was the same at every other prison that I had been to, and of course, all the Southerners that I had ever done time with, of course, was solid with the business, and so that was just something that I definitely just didn't believe. I asked a couple of other homies, and they all confirmed it, but like I said, that was something that I just didn't believe. There happened to be a couple of Southerners on this tier that I was on, and they was real cool. A couple of dudes from Pomona, my celly Dimp from Long Beach 20s, he used to chop it up with him and sometimes go in the cell and holler at him. It was a younger one. He was still trying to kind of like fit in. The older one, he didn't care, because with all the Hispanics there, they still had somewhat of rules and regulations among themselves, right? And so those 2 dudes was cool, right? And so later on, there happened to be a Hispanic dude walking down the tier, and this particular Hispanic dude had got caught with wine a couple of times. He had ran his points up, and now they were sending him to a level 4. CMC East was a level 3. These particular dudes was clowning. Every time he'd go by, they'd say, dead man walking, dead man walking. They'd be laughing and clowning. And so basically talking about that this dude was going to another institution, and due to the fact he had chose to stay at CMC, he was more than likely going to be stabbed. At this time, I had become on good terms with these 2 dudes. So then I happened to ask them, hey man, is that true? And they confirmed it. Yes, And so later on, at times, you would also start to see when some Hispanics who came there and refused to stay. So like I told you guys, they would come there, they would be put in that reception cell. You may have some Hispanics go up there and talk to them. Now, that reception cell was right across from the canteen. It was a mini canteen on the yard. And so you might hear a Southerner go to that window where they had just brought in the new arrivals, the Hispanics, and ask them, did they plan on staying or not? Some would say no, some would say yes. For the ones that said no, I heard them before tell them, hey, well, listen, man, when you guys come out, you guys can get a one-on-one. We're not going to jump you or whatever like that. Every now and then, they might release 1 or 2 after his 24-hour period was up, and they would walk around the track, basically just scoping out a victim, looking for somebody to rush And once once they found who they wanted to find, they would rush them, start fighting. The police would come over there, break up the situation, and they'd be taken to the hole. At one point in time, one hit the yard. They was fighting. Happened to be two COs right in front of me. One of them said, "Come on, let's go." The other one said, "No, man, kick back. Let's watch it. Let's watch it." And they just took their time walking until they got over there and broke everything up. So anytime Hispanics hit the yard, after a while, when I was there, I realized that it became almost a sense of entertainment. The administration knew what was going on. They would, when Hispanics were being released from the reception cell, they'd be standing around watching to see if a fight or not was going to break out. I also happened to work with a Northerner. Maybe a few years down the line, the Northerner was on B yard, and I worked in the kitchen, the hospital kitchen, and the Northerner worked there. And so he was telling me how he had came from another institution. It wasn't any space on B yard because it's only 2 buildings on each yard. On B yard, one of those buildings is used for the hole. So it's really like only 1 building on B yard. So when he got there, it wasn't enough space. So he was put in the hole just until some space opened up for him to get released to the yard. So now while he's in the hole, he told me that there were a few other Northerners in the hole who had came to that prison and refused to stay. And so they was telling him, of course, what to do when you go to the yard, you get off. It was a couple of Northerners that was on the yard. And he told me that they pointed out those Northerners because the hole was just like that reception building on A yard. You could actually look out on the yard and see people walking by and stuff like that. So when he was in the hole, he told me, a couple of Northerners had pointed out the other Northerners who had chose to stay and now were no longer deemed good. And he was supposed to go to the yard and attack these dudes. So eventually, once he was released, he went to the yard. He told me, the Northerners pushed up on him, asked him, was he going to stay or not? He said now, from his cell that he was in, he looked out there and could see these guys eating ice cream and stuff like that. And he'd already made up his mind to stay. So he told me the policy is the Northerners asked him, was he going to stay? He said yes. So they still had structure as well, the Northerners who had chose to stay. He told me that so for the next 72 hours, anytime he was on the yard, he had to walk with his hands behind his back. At any time, if he removed his hands from behind his back, it would be seen as an act of aggression and he would be attacked and beat up by the Northerners there. So he told me that he chose to stay and he was out there chilling. I guess after his 72 hours was up or whatever, he was out there eating the ice cream. One of the Northerners that bought him ice cream, and some Northerners out the window hollered at him and asked him, "Hey, what's up, man? What you doing?" He said, "Hey, I'm eating ice cream, man." So he said, "I'm staying." So they was a little upset with him staying, but that was basically the process right there. On A yard, it wasn't any Northerners on A yard. From time to time on A yard, the Southerners would rush a black or something like that if they had chose not to stay, if they could catch one slipping. But for the most part, when they would be released to the yard, everybody would know, everybody would be ready. I did run across a black dude who told me that when he initially got there and he was in R&R, a Hispanic from down south had rushed him from the back and attacked him in R&R, so they never got to the yard. I also had a homeboy who was a clerk in the program office. On this particular day, everybody happened to be locked down for 12 o'clock count, and he was running some paperwork from one spot to another, and some new arrivals had just got there, 2 Hispanics who didn't plan on staying. So he was walking across the yard. They seen him and rushed him, and he happened to get into a fight with those guys. But it was very rare that they would rush the blacks. One thing too also about CMC East is every 4 or 5 months, it seemed like the yard would flip. You'd always continually see new faces. And while the Southern Hispanics who chose to stay on CMC East had somewhat of a structure, they definitely wasn't politicking and pushing a line like other prisons. Actually, there was a Hispanic dude who was the quarterback of the black football team, and the blacks there, they didn't trip, man. They didn't trip on the Hispanics coming to play basketball, the Hispanics being on the football team or whatever. I particularly remember an incident that happened one time in the kitchen. It was an older dude by the name of Famous. Famous was maybe about 5'6", maybe about 155 pounds,
probably not even that big, maybe about 145 pounds, small dude. And like I said, he was older. He got into it in the kitchen with a younger Hispanic dude, and for whatever reason, they end up having a fight. Famous happened to be in my building. I didn't work in the kitchen. After he got into the fight, you had a few black dudes who was in the kitchen. They was laughing and clowning Famous. I guess during the fight, Famous had got tired. You know, the blacks just stood around and watched this dude fight. Now, to keep it 100 with y'all, I was upset. You know, had I been in the kitchen, I would have definitely took the fade for that dude, because you can best believe that if the situation was reversed, the Southsiders would have never allowed a young black dude to fight an old man, especially at a prison that the blacks who chose to remain there would be considered no good among their people. So, you know, this was something, like I said, that I definitely disagreed with, but you know, that's some people for you or whatever. Now, to keep it 100, it definitely was a whole lot of telling at CMC. Unnecessary telling. I ended up getting into a fight with a dude from Long Beach who happened to be my ex-cellie. He was from Two Ends. I believe his name was AD. Me and him went and had a head-up fight in the bathroom, just involving me and him. The very next morning, somebody had told, they came and locked our door, took us to the program office. So yes, it definitely was that type of telling going on, you know, people just telling for nothing. Now, even though the Hispanics who chose to stay at that prison were deemed no good by their people, don't get it twisted. They definitely wasn't, they definitely wasn't soft. They definitely wasn't punks. They still were men. Case in point, like I remember there was a time where in another building, and this involved a dude who, his name wasn't Super Crip, but he definitely would be labeled a Super Crip. And a Super Crip or a Super Blood is a person that's just always extra out, you know. They always just, you know, acting like they the hardest gang member. They saying cuz of blood every second word, and they give off a real tough aura. So anyway, it was Hispanic in the shower, and this is at a time when the Hispanics numbers wasn't that high, right? There was a Hispanic in the shower with this Super Crip dude. I don't know whatever they had words over, but it led to words up in the shower. The Hispanic dude called the Super Crip a bitch. Now, we all know those are definitely fighting words, right? But the Super Crip didn't want the fade. You know what I'm saying? He turned it down and left it alone. And that was a big deal there on the yard, that this dude who, you know, gave off this hella tough image, you know, was called a bitch and didn't do anything. So just because, you know, a person for whatever reason would hit that prison and choose not to stay, maybe he might have had a year to the house, or maybe, who knows, you know, maybe he wanted to kick back and do his time in peace, or whatever reason. But don't get it twisted, because that definitely didn't mean that those who chose to stay were soft. You know, men were still men. Sometime around 2011, I got caught with a cell phone and I got put up for transfer. It was a prison by the name of North Kern that initially was a reception center. A reception center is a prison. When you leave the county jail, you go to this prison and you get analyzed and assessed, and they decide whether you need minimum, medium, or security housing, and then they'll send you there. At some point in time, the California Department of Corrections decided to turn this prison from a reception center to a main line and put convicts in all the 5 buildings there. They were shipping a lot of people from CMC East to North Kern. So they started shipping convicts from CMC East down to North Kern. And it was probably like about a 3 or 4 month process. And when I got caught with that cell phone, I was put on one of the very last buses down there. So all the Hispanic convicts and white convicts who left CMC East and went down to North Kern, when they hit the yard, they was viciously attacked, beat up, some was stabbed. I happened to be in my cell, and there was a Hispanic dude next door to me who had came down from CMC East. Porter, who was Hispanic, came to his cell and asked, you know, for him to send his paperwork out and stuff like that so he could be checked and see if he was good. He slid his paperwork under the door. I heard him ask the dude, he asked him, hey, you know, I'm coming down from CMC East, man. Basically, am I in trouble? And the porter told him, hey, and he told him, hey, homie, look, man, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Yeah, you're definitely going to get an issue from the homies, right? I don't know what ended up happening to him, But yes, if you were coming from CMC East, the Hispanics and the whites was definitely getting tore up. There was another white dude who I was at CMC East with. He went by the name of Wolverine, due to the fact that he was from Michigan. Now, at CMC East, he loved to hang out, talk with the blacks and stuff, borrow black books, read and stuff. And he said that during time in Michigan, they didn't have those racial politics like they had in California. So when he was transferred to North Kern, he was already aware that his head was going to be on the chopping block. So in his particular building, I know the whites had got at another white dude who had came down from CMC East and told him that the homies on the yard wanted to talk to him, told him that don't trip, since you're over 45 or whatever they told him, we're not tripping on the older white dudes that come down from CMC East, but it was all the rules. So once he got outside at a certain time, he was attacked. But Wolverine, he refused to come outside. I guess Wolverine felt the vibes and he wasn't going for that. So I guess the whites already had it planned and choreographed that when you hear the alarm go off or at a certain time, we're going to attack this dude, and you guys attack Wolverine inside the building since he didn't come out, So I was told that when they attacked Wolverine, beep, boop, bop, beep, boop, beep, bop, boop, bop, bop, Wolverine was in there squabbing, fighting 3 or 4 of them. He was doing his thing. A few of them had razors and kind of cut Wolverine up pretty bad, but they said Wolverine was in there fighting, scrapping, and handling his business. Now, somewhere around 2016, when you had all the people being released from those indeterminate shoes in Pelican Bay due to that lawsuit that they had won, and due to the end of hostilities agreement that they had came up with, there happened to be a Southern Hispanic, and let's just say this dude had extremely big rankings. He was sent to CMC. I believe it was him and another dude who they claimed was, a little under him or whatever, right? The dude was kind of older. He was an older dude, and like I said, it was alleged on the yard that this dude had extremely high ranking in his organization. So of course, he gets to the yard, word floats around that he's here, and it's a big hoopla. Everybody wants to see what's going on. And they kept him in that reception cell a little longer than usual. So maybe he was released in about 3 or 4 days. So when he was finally released to the yard, there had to be an extra 15 COs on the yard, just mulling around on the yard. I'm assuming to see if this guy if he was gonna stay or whatever he was gonna do, right? So they released him and the other dude that had came down with him. So he's walking around, he wouldn't post it up on the wall, and some dudes came over there, they was talking. Maybe about 15-20 minutes later, he walked over to the softball bleachers. After he got to the bleachers, all the Hispanics on the yard who were there already and who had been deemed no good, they went over there for a meeting, I guess. They sat and they had a meeting, and now the police, as well as everybody else on the yard, is just sitting around watching this, right? So they have this meeting over there on the bench, and maybe after about 25-30 minutes later, they break up. Everybody walk away, they shake hands, they walk away and leave. So what the rumor was that guy who had came down from Pelican Bay, he had now opened up that yard and made it okay for Hispanics to come there. And now suddenly the Hispanics started flooding in. So now when they would come from other institutions and they would hit that reception cell, of course, they'd say, hey man, I can't be here. But of course, the Hispanics would go over there and somebody would tell them that, this yard was no longer off limits. So now I'm steady watching the population of the Southern Hispanics on this yard swell. The numbers are getting big. Also, my case in point, like I said, if this yard had been deemed no good by the California Department of Corrections, no convict can come to the yard and say, hey man, this yard is now good. So like I said, that was just something that was implemented among their own people. Now, as these numbers are starting to swell and come, more Hispanics are starting to come there. anybody that done any time can slowly see that a riot is brewing, because now the Hispanics, they're asking for certain areas on the yard now. They want certain benches to be theirs, they want a weight pal, stuff like that, certain places to work out. And before that guy came down, they never had these type of things, because like I said, at different point in times, their numbers would go up, their numbers would go down. Nothing was never established, right? So anybody who had done any time before could definitely see a riot on the horizon. Somewhere in, I guess, late 2016, early 2017, my points dropped and I became a level 2. So I went to CMC West. I couldn't have been on CMC West no longer than 3 or 4 months when a riot jumped off on CMC East and a white Crip got killed. The riot was between the Southern Hispanics and the blacks. And a riot, like I say, jumped off. Actually, a dude by the name of Matthew Cook, who went by the name of M1, who lived maybe about 7 or 8 tiers from me who lived about 7 or 8 cells down from me on the same tier, happened to be killed. I used to speak to this dude pretty regularly, and so it was a trip, right? Learning that he had got killed in that riot, right? Unfortunately, he was 25 years old and had lost his life. Now, a person can look at this one or two ways. When a lot of those big shots from all organizations was released from Pelican Bay after years and years and years of doing indeterminate shoes, I believe they was released with the understanding to try to go back to these yards and create peace, right? So for the guy who came down and came to CMC, if he had chose not to stay and leave by way of violence, it definitely could have potentially jeopardized him being back on the main line and possibly sent him to the hole. But then again, a person may also look at it like this. Well, what about the other Southern Hispanics who came to that yard and chose not to stay and left by way of violence and just had to suffer whatever consequences they had to suffer by coming there and refusing to stay? And see, that's the bad thing about being in any gang, any organization, right? Because after doing a lot of time in prison, doing time in gangs, I've always seen that every now and then certain special allowances are made for certain members. So a person could always look at it like that. As far as, like I said, for the blacks, that prison was never made off limits. I ran across a lot of famous Crips and Bloods who were famous in the penitentiary and the streets being on that yard, so it definitely was not off limits for the blacks. You may have some people who will say that CMC was a soft prison, and at times, you definitely had things happening at CMC that would have happened at other prisons and caused violence. But I also seen a lot of violence at CMC, a lot of stabbings, a lot of fights and stuff, due to the fact that there seemed to be less political structure at CMC, and there's always going to be people who think that they can come there and just run amok and they don't have to follow any type of structure, that they can take advantage of people and do things that they wouldn't do at other institutions. But of course, you're always going to run across somebody that's not going for that, and you look up and you're in trouble, you knocked out or you stabbed or whatever. But anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.
House with family, eating, smoking, and playing games.
I smoked a couple ops, left him in the box. The only man that ever hit me with his hand, it was my pops. Any other dummy try, he bout to die, my nigga watch. In a hurry, cause I'm Conrad Murray, giving deadly shots, overdosing till they drop. And I ain't talking propofol, it's 50 in this rifle clip, that's 25 for both of y'all. I played the game so well, I'm qualified for coaching y'all. Got arrested, nigga faced the L and never spoke at all. Got 16 to life in that I never choked at all. I did 24 years before they opened up the wall. Don't ask me about no soap at all, cause nigga, that's some gay shit. And like dog shit in the street, I'm nothing to play with. The business what I stay with like a stockbroker. I ain't got famous by talking, nigga, I'm not Oprah. I used to ride so much, they called me the black chauffeur, leaving big holes and shit like that Caddyshack gopher.
Is it ratchet when they say they ratchet? They really ain't. With the shit that I be making, they just don't